Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining. My name is Diana Vasquez. I'm the BERDO Review Board Manager. So the BERDO Review Board does not currently have an appointed chair, so I'll lead us in a vote for acting chair. Does anyone on the board want to make a nomination for acting chair today?
I nominate Steve Ellis.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'll now lead us in a vote. How do you vote for the motion to nominate Board Member Ellis to serve as acting chair? In favor, opposed, or abstained? Board Member Boyd,
In favor.
Board Member Ellis,
In favor.
Board Member nope, Lattimore,
In favor.
and Board Member Nelson.
In favor.
Great. I will now hand the meeting over to Acting Chair Ellis.
Thank you, Diana. All right. Good afternoon. I am calling, one moment. I know this is not a public meeting. Yes, it is a public meeting, not the public hearing yet, just making sure I got my script together. Good afternoon. I'm calling this public meeting to order at 4:36 p.m. in accordance with the Building Emission Reduction Disclosure Ordinance regulations adopted pursuant to the Building Emission Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Section 7-2.2. The BERDO Review Board will hold a virtual public meeting at 4:30 on September 9th to review the following topics in regards to the reduction of greenhouse gases from building energy production and consumption so as to promote the public health and welfare of Boston residents. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this public meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the BERDO Review Board, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, send your questions to staff via email at berdoreviewboard@boston.gov. For the record, I am Stephen Ellis, acting chair of the board. I will now conduct a roll call of board members. Board members, please say your name in the order that they appear on the slide.
Rashida Boyd.
Stephen Ellis,
Gail Lattimore.
Jack Nelson.
and staff will now introduce themselves.
Diana Vasquez, BERDO Review Board Manager.
Ziggy Chen, BERDO Review Board Assistant.
Here is the agenda for today's hearing and meeting. Apologies to our applicants. We've actually had a last-minute reordering of the agenda. We are going to start with approving meeting minutes, administrative updates, then we'll hear from the finalists, and finally adjourn. First on the meeting agenda is to approve the previous meeting minutes from August 26. Are there any questions or comments regarding the meeting minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the motion to approve the meeting minutes, board members may vote in favor, oppose, or abstain if they did not attend the last meeting. Those in favor of approving the meeting minutes say aye or show your hands. Aye.
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 All right. The ayes have it. I saw no abstaining or nays needing to be said. So the motion passes. Now we will cover administrative updates. Ziggy.
All right. So we have received 2 nominations from our previous open nomination process to join the review board, and we're working with the mayor's team to work out the next steps to fill out the empty seats. I want to give also a quick update on the number of flexibility applications we have received so far. We currently have 17 building portfolio applications and 4 ICS applications. For our next meeting on the 23rd, there'll be 4 building portfolios that'll be before the board to vote on. And that will also be the same meeting that you'll be voting on the awardees of the fund. And also there is an upcoming webinar I want to bring your attention. It will provide an overview of BERDO compliance for condo associations. The webinar is on September 25th. From 6 to 8 p.m. and the link to register is below in the slide deck. There's also an event link on the BERDO Review Board website and just the BERDO website as well. And then, so looking forward to our next meetings next month. October 14th is Indigenous People Day, and staff proposes rescheduling this meeting to October 15th, as we will have 3 building portfolio applications that should be heard on that meeting. So what does the board think about this proposal to move the October 14th meeting, which is on the Monday, to October 15th, which is Tuesday?
Okay, thank you, Ziggy. Before we move on, I just want to check, for the sake of time, are there any questions from the board regarding the administrative updates?
Did we confirm whether if it's gonna move from Monday or Tuesday?
Correct.
Is that-
So, Chair, the city proposes that we move the October, what was originally slated for
Okay,
October
okay.
14th. Depending on the board, if the board feels good about that moving from a Monday to a Tuesday, we can have a discussion.
Oh, it's fine with me.
Okay, so just running down the line here, I know that we don't have the full board, but just checking first with board member Boyd. I'm not sure if I heard a response. Does that Tuesday work for you, or would you prefer something else?
That works. Thank you.
Board member Lattimore?
Yes, fine.
Okay, and board member Nelson?
Yes, I can make that.
Okay, not a problem. Let me just double check my own calendar. I believe that should also work for me. So do we need a motion, or is just this verbal confirmation enough, Diana?
I believe this verbal confirmation should be sufficient. So Ziggy and I can update anything we need on the back end, and we'll move that. We'll have our regular meeting on that Tuesday.
All right. Thank you very much. So our next meeting after September 23rd will be now Tuesday, October 15th. Thank you. And
Correct.
thank you. And just as a confirmation, or just in terms of knowledge, Ziggy, can you give us some insight about how long it may take for those 2 applicants or nominations for the board would go through, just out of curiosity?
Then I want to take that.
Sure thing. So yes, the nominations form closed not this previous Friday, but the Friday before. So at the end of September, we have sent a summary of the 2 nominees or 2 nominations um, to the mayor's office, and we are hoping that we'll hear back by the end of this month. Then following that, after the mayor's appointment, there'll be a vote of confirmation by the city council. So if the city council does not vote and confirm on those nominees within 90 days, the nominees are presumed approved and then can join the board officially. So depending on how quickly the process can move, it could be as early as by the end of this month that we have new folks on the board. I suppose worst case scenario, if it takes, the full 3 months, it would look a little bit more like by January.
Okay. Thank you, Diana.
And sorry, one more thing, Chair, not related to the nominations, but just wanted to highlight, Ziggy, if you'd go back a slide. I wanted to make sure folks, and one more. Oh, just kidding. Did we not have our timeline slide? I just wanted to note, yes, so the September 23rd hearing, currently, we are hoping for the board to have an official vote on the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund from today. And also, they would have 3 building portfolio applications slated for the 23rd. So, or sorry, 4 for the 23rd, and then 3 for October 15th. So that was part of the reason why we wanted to propose the October 15th, because we have a slew of building portfolio applications coming down the pike.
Okay. Thank you, Diana. Shall we transition to the next part? All right. We will now switch our switch over to our public hearing. I am now calling this public hearing to order at 4:45 p.m. Thank you to our finalists for your patience. Before we start this agenda, would any board members like to accuse themselves?
Yes, I would like to recuse myself because my agency has an application that's going to be discussed. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, Board Member Lattimore. Okay, so Diana, I just want to check if we are still good, given that we might be under quorum right now.
Yes, that is a good flag. So with board member Lattimore recusing herself, we are actually under quorum and we need at least 4 members for this meeting to continue, this public meeting to continue. I may recommend that board member Lattimore join until her agency is presenting, in which case she could then recuse herself.
Okay.
Otherwise, we are waiting on the counselor to join us. So we will have to pause for 1 second as I reconnect with board member Lattimore.
Very well. Thank you, everyone. Please be patient with us.
Chair, for the record, board member Lattimore has rejoined.
Welcome back, Board Member Lattimore. All right. The review board will now hear presentations from the fund finalists who were selected at the last hearing. I will pass it over to Diana and the fund finalists.
All right, thank you, everyone. Sorry, apologies for our brief pause. So just wanted to quickly review what has been done so far during this process. So during the Equitable Emissions Investments Fund application process so far, we opened earlier this month in the summer and closed in August, and or actually late July, and received 19 applications in total. The BERDO team conducted an initial review with the city's legal and grants teams for general eligibility of the proposed projects and making sure that the city could in fact grant some money to them, to the projects. We then shared the applications that were deemed eligible with an accompanying summary page to each of the board members, and each board member received sort of a rubric of the different evaluation criteria that has been shared publicly, so anyone can see the rubric. I actually think it's on the next slide as well. And then on the August 26th hearing, the review board voted on 5 finalists to come present today. So that's who we have slated to speak today, which we're very excited to hear from. Yes, so that's what's happened so far. On the next slide, this is the project evaluation sheet or rubric. So just as a reminder, all the submitted project proposals are evaluated with these criteria in mind, with emissions reductions being the sort of mandatory one, the only mandatory criteria that each project proposal is required to have to be eligible to receive funding from the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. So just wanted to review what the procedure will be for today. So the applicants will present on their project proposals, sort of a summary, and then any sort of questions that we had from the August 26th hearing. We shared those with them as well. The review board will have a chance to share their thoughts or ask any questions during each project presentation. And then at the very end, the chair will open a public comment period in case there's anyone who would like to submit a comment or just have a question. And so the next steps for transparency purposes, the review board will then, after the conclusion of this hearing, the review board will be sent a Google form where they will have a chance to rank their choices and share any thoughts or questions that they would have. And then we, the city, will get back to the applicants with any of that information. And then the review board is expected to vote at the September 23rd hearing on final fund recommendations. And so this, just as a reminder, here's the order for the presentation today. So we're starting with Green Energy Consumers Alliance and their Equisol, the Blue Line Solar Access Project, our access program, Fenway Community Development Corporation with Burbank Gardens Zero Overtime Decarbonization. Third will be Dorchester Bay Economic Development Corporation with Dorchester Bay Solar for Residents. The fourth will be the community builders with their new Franklin Park solar installation project, and we'll conclude with Convent Square Neighborhood Development Corporation with their advancing building decarbonization at Washington Columbia 1 and 2. So with that being said, I think we can pass it over. So slated first will be Green Energy Consumers Alliance with their project proposal titled Equisol, the Blue Line Solar Access Program.
Thank you, Diana, and everybody else on the board. So you'll do the slides for me. My name is Larry Cretion. I'm the Executive Director of the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We're a 42-year-old organization that has been based in Jamaica Plain all this time. Our office now is at the brewery complex in Jamaica Plain. But Equisol is a program brought to you all by a consortium doing clockwise. Palmer Capital is based in Massachusetts. They are advising us on the financial aspects of solar development, and they'll help obtain the lenders that we need to make our projects work. Green Energy Consumers Alliance, as I said, we're a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to help consumers and communities speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. Resonant Energy is also based in Boston. They are a company, a certified B corporation that actually specializes in trying to broaden access to solar energy. They work very much in the low and moderate income category, and they have done a lot of projects in Boston and around the state. One Way Development is a minority-owned construction company based in Boston. They have a lot of employees who live in Boston and in the vicinity, and they would be the company that would be doing the installations that we'll be talking about. Next slide, please. So here's an overview. With Equisol, we want to do at scale. We want to bring low and moderate income people to solar and solar to low and moderate income people. We want to create a self-sustaining program that delivers high savings at scale to consumers. And we want to work with grassroots organizations, very much like many of the applicants who are on tonight, Community Land Trust, small landlords, and low and moderate income homeowners. And we want to develop projects that others have found very difficult to finance. The category that we're looking for just statistically is way underrepresented among solar installations in Boston, in Massachusetts, and throughout the country. So we are working on, right now, we're proposing funding for what we call the Blue Line Solar Access Program. It's on 10 buildings in Boston, most of which are in East Boston, and affiliated with East Boston CDC and a couple of other property owners. It's 92.7 kilowatts DC. The total pre-development cost and installation costs are estimated to be over $427,000. The grant funding we're seeking would support covering the installation cost of that portfolio. It would increase value to the property owners and to the tenants of the low and moderate income housing units, and it would provide support to our Equisol program so that we can be better positioned to do more projects beyond this 10. We want to continue to do projects like the ones we're describing tonight. Next slide. So solar feasibility, we're pretty much ready to go. All 10 sites have had site visits and interconnection plans submitted to the utility. They've been approved by the utility, Eversource. Applications have been submitted to the Department of Energy for bonus tax credits, in particular what they call Category 1, which is a 10% bonus tax credit that would be on top of 30% tax credit that we would get essentially by right. We're a nonprofit Consumers Alliance, would own the panels, and we would get the equivalent of the tax credit through direct pay. So what's in progress? We're going to work out hosting agreements between ourselves and the property owners. Funding for from this would come from, to do these projects, would come from the Equitable Emissions Fund. Also, we hope to tap into the Commonwealth Solar for All program and some other sources. And we do have to do some structural assessments on each building, but we don't expect any impediments on that score. So we think we're pretty well ready to go. The funding that we would receive from the Equitable Emissions Fund would allow us to go deeper in terms of the savings to the tenants. Next slide. With respect to the way we work together, is Resident Energy has been working on this project for some time, doing some pre-development work, and they've worked with Green Energy Consumers and Palmer and One Way Development. We've received some support from the Mass Clean Energy Center to bring this project so far to you. These projects, Resident took these projects to some more traditional solar financiers, for-profit organizations that generally do a good job in trying to broaden access to solar energy, but they're unable to deliver benefits that would to the tenants and to the property owners and cover the additional cost. So that's what we're here for. As a nonprofit organization, we actually are ahead of the line above for-profits in terms of competing for the tax credits at the federal level. All of the applications have been put into the federal government, and we are now just waiting to see what they say. It just takes a little bit of time. East Boston CDC is making repairs to the buildings to make them code compliant. And once the repairs are made, they will engage Mass Save and the LEAN program, basically ABCD, to take any steps to make them more energy efficient. Next slide. Workforce development. One Way Development, I think, stands out among contractors in Greater Boston. They've been around for a long time. They are committed to the city. They've completed a lot of projects in Boston, including new construction, and they've always complied with the Boston Residents Jobs Policy. They're registered with Mass Hire. They are affiliated with the Regional Council of Carpenters, and they're just constantly trying to expand like other businesses. And they do so by working with their staff and subcontractors to try to hire Boston residents, people of color, and women. They even have an employee referral program that helps bring more minority staff to their company. So essentially, the work that would be done to install will be done by One Way Development and by their very diverse workforce. Next slide. This slide further demonstrates their track record, and we'd appreciate it if you'd look at that. They've won community awards for their diversity, equity, and inclusion work. When they need subcontractors, they will generally hire small minority contractors. They prioritize hiring, and you can see that their track record's pretty strong in terms of hiring. It's almost entirely a minority staff, increasing number of women on staff, but they also have 60% Boston residents, and I would say the 40% that are not Boston residents would live nearby. So they've got I think they're the kinds they represent the kind of company that I think the program is looking for. Next slide. Tenant communications, Equisol, particularly with both Resident and with One Way, will work with East Boston CDC and the Boston Neighborhood Community Land Trust, which owns one of the buildings, to provide materials explaining the program and the way we're going to work the financials. That material will be in Spanish. We've got staff at my organization, Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and at One Way and Resident who can speak Spanish. We'll communicate with them, We don't expect major disruptions during the installations, but we will communicate to them about that. And one of the things we'll be explaining to folks is how they will benefit. They will receive on the bill credits to their electricity bill, their Eversource bill. They won't have to pay for those. We will be not collecting money from the tenants. We'll be just sending them credits because of we're putting together the finances based upon hopefully this grant, and hopefully will receive the 40% tax credit from the federal government. Next slide. The emissions reduction, we use the formula suggested by your program to calculate that. We are looking at 99 kilowatts DC, but 77.6 kilowatts AC. That enables us to calculate the production on an annual basis and over the lifetime of the project, and that we're able to look at the emissions factor of pounds per megawatt hour. We use that from your information. And we do want to emphasize that a grant to Equisol for this project will have direct results from the 10 buildings that will be solarized, but you're going to help set up Equisol that we can replicate. And that's what we want to do. So we hope that this will be an award that provides multiple benefits over time. Next slide. So the impact, a lot depends on whether or not we receive the tax credits, which we think we will, and how much we receive, if any, from this fund. So there's a range of financial impact that we could provide. Some credits to the common area meters of the 10 properties, so that the building owners can see that benefit, trying to make that project, their properties more affordable to maintain, and that will depend. But then we're also going to provide some amount of bill credits to the low-income residents, and that will benefit them by either a little less than $200,000 or almost $500,000 over time. So the total savings could be up to $646,000. That will also, the savings from the project will put us in a solid position to take advantage of Solar for All funding and tax credits to try to replicate these projects at scale. Next slide. That's it. We can answer any questions. I do want to say with me tonight, we have Gordon Dean from Palmer Capital, Maddie Barr and Rachel Gentile from Resident Energy, Abraham Gonzalez from One Way Development. He's the CEO, and working with me at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we have Chika Chuku is our program associate, and Michaela Hundress McCarthy, who is our financial director and renewable energy program director. So if you have questions for me or for my colleagues, we're here to answer those. And thank you.
Chair, maybe right before we get into the questions, I just wanted to note that Councilor Coletta Zapata has joined the meeting as well.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Councilor Coletta Zapata. Welcome. All right. So we'll move on from there. Are there any questions or comments from the board that they would like to discuss? I'm actually going to start in reverse order just to give the councilor a moment, seeing as she just joined. So I will be starting with you, Board Member Nelson.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry, for the presentation. Of the 10 buildings, how many must comply with BERDO?
My understanding is that they would not. They're too small. We're talking approximately 50 or 60 units among 10 properties. Maddie Barr or Rachel, that's your understanding, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Most of these buildings are, most of them are triple deckers. I think one or two of them are 6-unit, but they're relatively small. And they're all doing deep retrofits and energy efficiency work, but I can't say if it's specifically BERDO. I don't think so.
Okay. And of the tenant's electric bill, what is the portion of that that will be offset through these solar, the energy created by the solar array?
We're hoping that if we receive this grant and we receive the bonus tax credit, that we would be able to provide a minimum of 20% of their bill reduced, and maybe as high as 50%.
Okay.
A lot would also have to do with the rates of electricity over time.
Now, has the GC bid the work yet to help you develop an estimate for the project?
We have a pretty solid estimate on the cost. Yes, we do. That was in the budget and the narrative. We explained that when we did the application.
Okay,
So
so
we feel pretty confident that we will be able to move fairly quickly after we were to hear from you all on this project.
so you have sufficient plans for developed so that you could ask different installing contractors to price the work?
No, actually, One Way Development is the contractor that gave us the estimate for the cost. And it was we felt that it was a very competitive proposal, and they will do the installation.
So
And Abraham Gonzalez is available.
so they have
So
they
just
have
to clarify,
electricians on
we're
board?
GCs, but yes, we're also electricians.
Okay, so you install the PV systems yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
And all of the sites have had site visits. So the estimates are based on customized, specific plans for each building.
Okay, and structural assessments have yet to be done.
I'm sorry?
What, structural assessments of the roofs to support the weight, has that been reviewed?
Structural still has to be done.
That still has to be done. Okay. All right, I have no further questions. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. Board Member Lattimore.
Yes, I will recuse myself now that I understand that there is a quorum. So unless I'm mistaken, Diana?
You're welcome to recuse yourself now if you would like, Board Member Lattimore.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Board Member Lattimore. All right, so I guess now it's over to me. I actually don't have any questions. Board Member Nelson actually asked a question that I would have asked to the organization One Way. So thank you for your presentation and your explanation of your project. I will now turn it over to Councilor Coletta Zapata.
No questions.
I apologize. I just needed to get off of mute. So this is the Blue Line portfolio, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I believe, to the chair, seeing that I have dealings with the East Boston CDC and I actually work to get funding on this project, I think this is one of those instances where I also need to recuse myself. I'm looking for some guidance on that.
Yes, I'm happy to jump in. So this is actually an application from Green Energy Consumers Alliance, apologies. And there previously was an application from East Boston CDC. I believe the counselor is referring to that application. East Boston CDC will not be presenting today. So I think you're good, counselor.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarity that I needed, because they did also submit an application and I conflated the two of them. So and I apologize for coming in late. This is something that is in my district and insanely important to my residents and the residents that will benefit from this. So I think that is just a comment. I don't have any questions right now. I may have some as I continue to look through the presentation, just catching up. So feel free to circle back to me, but at this point, I'll pass the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Board Member Boyd.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to the Green Energy Consumers Alliance for presenting today. I will now turn it back over. Excuse me, actually, one moment. Diana, do I need to open up a public meeting comment, or is that for later?
We have them slated for the end.
All right, thank you. So I'll turn it back over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Acting Chair, and thank you, Green Energy Consumers Alliance, for kicking us off. I will now hand the proverbial mic over to Fenway CDC.
Good afternoon, BERDO Review Board, city staff, other participants, and members of the public. I am Suneet John, Deputy Director and Head of Real Estate at Fenway CDC. With me here is Ari Sugarman, as the Management Associate, and we are here to present the Burbank Garden Zero Overtime Decarbonization Project, the site for which is a 52-unit, 100% income-restricted housing property in the Fenway. First, a short introduction to Fenway CDC. Next slide, please. Fenway CDC, or Fenway Community Development Corporation, is a 51-year-old organization dedicated to preserving Fenway as a vibrant and diverse neighborhood. Our mission includes three main core components: expanding affordable housing, second, increasing community engagement leading to neighborhood improvement, and third, strengthening economic and social well-being of our residents. Next slide, please. This image here illustrates the three core mission components that I mentioned and how it translates to the work that we do. As you can see, we are engaged in robust housing development and asset management activities. We also serve over 800 neighborhood residents each year, while also engaging them in a wide variety of events and activities. Next slide, please. To set the context for the project that we are presenting, I wanted to share the recent climate-related work undertaken by the CDC. These include being part of Boston Green Ribbon Commission's Climate Action Planning Cohort, receiving LISC, Massachusetts, and City of Boston funding for decarbonization studies, moving ahead with plans to install a PV system on one of our properties, exploring a virtual microgrid, and finally, becoming the first entity to being approved for BERDO portfolio flexibility measure by the city. These are very exciting times indeed at the CDC. And with that, I would like to invite my colleague, Ari, to share our project. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Suneet, and it's good to see everyone again back from the board. To give everyone some context on the site itself, as Suneet mentioned, Burbank Gardens is a 52-unit masonry building located in the Fenway neighborhood. It was built in 1910 and was acquired in 2017 by Fenway CDC to preserve its affordability. After a small rehab that included elevator upgrades, repointing, etc., residents were able we continue to operate the building since then. The building is located in the Fenway neighborhood, the East Fenway more specifically, by the Christian Science Center, Symphony Hall, part of the world, around the intersection of Mass Ave and Huntington Ave. In the bottom right, you can see some photos of the building. And to give you a sense of the affordability restrictions of the building, like Suneet mentioned, all units are restricted. 11 of the units are restricted to residents with 30% AMI or lower. Another 7 for residents 50% of AMI or lower. 21 for residents 60% AMI or lower. The remaining to residents 90% AMI or lower. These are restricted in perpetuity. Next slide, please. To give you a sense of the scope of work of this project, we're planning to upgrade the electrical service capacity at the site to accommodate future full electrification of the site and its systems. Along with this, we plan to install heat pump water heaters, so we'll be electrifying the domestic hot water systems. We'll install Energy Star rooftop exhaust fans, low flow shower heads, temperature averaging controls for the domestic hot water and hydronic heating systems. We'll be installing occupancy sensors in the common area and the hallway lighting. And wherever they're missing within units, we'll be installing LED lighting fixtures. Next slide, please. So this project will cost a bit less than $2 million. The biggest chunk of which is dedicated to electrification enabling costs. There's another couple $100,000 that is earmarked for those specific installation of those energy saving upgrades. We have 25,000 or so that is identified for personnel costs to Fenway CDC for staffing the project, managing the project. We have 320,000 or so that is saved for consulting costs, so architects, engineers, sustainability consultants, etc. We have $175,000 contingency. Our funding for this project is drawn from two sources. We, as you can tell, are applying for Equitable Mission Investment Fund funding. So we're applying for just under $250,000 from the BERDO Equitable Mission Investment Fund. And for the remaining 1.75 million, we've applied to Whisk, Massachusetts Climate Ready Housing Zero Overtime Decarbonization Funding. To give you some context on this application, we have first submitted a pre-application for this funding, and were subsequently invited to submit a full application. And we were informed recently that we can expect a decision on our application by September 15th. So the coming week or so, we should know whether we receive this funding, and we will definitely make sure to let you all know about whether we get it. And just for reference, the items in the uses section that have asterisks by their name are the ones that we anticipate using BERDO EEIF funds to fund these upgrades. Next slide, please. The project partners we are considering working with on this project for our GC, it's HACOM, who we'll talk about more in the next slide. For architects, we have reached out and discussed this project with Dream Collaborative and Blue Pod Architects. Both of them have viewed the site and read the decarbonization report, and both are interested in working with us, and both have very extensive experience in this the energy efficiency building sphere. Once we are awarded funding, and we would then go through a process of deciding which firm to work with, and both have also indicated who their MEP and sustainability consultants they would like to work with. For example, Peterson Engineering and RDH Building Science are who Dream Collaborative prefers to work with. We would also expect to work with New Ecology on this project. New Ecology created the decarbonization study for which that is guiding this project and helped us determine the scope of work. And they also helped us determine the specific impacts of this scope of work. So we would continue working with them as well. Next slide, please. I wanted to spend a little more time on HACOM, so you get a sense of who they are. For reference, they helped us generate cost estimates for this project. They're a design build firm that specializes in high performance and passive house building. And they have multiple deep energy retro projects that they've completed or are in the process of completing in the city of Boston and the surrounding area. They have an extensive track record of hiring and contracting residents of Boston. They've successfully met WB, MBE requirements, as well as BRJP goals. On our current project with HACOM, Burbank Terrace, a ground-up affordable housing development in the Fenway, approximately 60% of hours worked have been by Boston residents and 80% by people of color. Next slide, please. We do quite a bit of resident engagement in general on our climate work, which I want to discuss, as well as more specifically on this project. So we're currently engaging in a portfolio-wide energy literacy campaign hosted by Climbable. We've done 5 events so far in 2024 and have more scheduled. These events, discuss general climate, the impacts of climate change, discussions of utility bills, what they mean, how to save, reduce your energy usage, etc. When we created the organizational level climate action plan as part of our participation in the Green Ribbon Commission's climate action planning cohort, we looped in residents to our planning process to ensure they were able to express feedback and be appraised of the work we hope to do as an organization. More specifically related to the Burbank Gardens decarbonization project, we presented the scope of work to our building captain of the site, to our resident leader, and we received their letter of support. Once we're awarded funding, we plan to host meetings with building residents to engage them on project plans and impacts, get their feedback, and answer any questions or concerns. Although this project is expected to be minimally invasive and will not require any relocation, we will still communicate any disruption to the normal operation of the building and the general work schedule that are part of this project. Next slide, please. These three tables show our current building performance. That's at the top here. So it's our baseline. This was generated by New Ecology when we created the decarbonization study with them that was funded by most of Massachusetts. The second table shows our proposed building performance. So where are we going to be in terms of our emissions, our energy use after completing this decarbonization project? And the final table shows the specific impact of each of these individual energy saving measures. Important to note, this project will save us about 20%. Will save us 20% in our energy use and would reduce our emissions at the site by 18%. In total, this would lead to a reduction in 39,247 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And I want to point out that this is a BERDO building. It is currently non-compliant. So this would help the building move in the direction of compliance and be very impactful in that regard. Next slide, please. And I just realized before I get into this, the electrification enabling upgrades, although will also allow us to do future energy saving upgrades in the future that will lead to further emissions and energy reductions down the line, hence the zero over time name of the decarbonization project. Other benefits stemming from this project include lower building operating expenses due to the reduced utility expenses and reduced BERDO compliance payments. This additional monies will be very impactful. We'll be able to reinvest these dollars back into the site to the further benefit of these affordable housing low and residents who are, as we saw earlier, of low income. It'll also, in general, allow for increased financial stability and viability of the site, ensuring that this, valuable affordable housing remains successful for years to come. By installing Energy Star exhaust fans, new Energy Star exhaust fans will be improving the in-unit air quality, which is currently at an unsatisfactory level, as was indicated in the decarbonization study performed by New Ecology. So that'll be very important. In general, by improving the unit air quality and replacing old aging hot water system with a new hot water system, will be improving resident comfort and resident quality of life. By replacing the gas-fired combustion domestic hot water system with an electrified system, we'll be reducing the amount of combustion-related emissions that will be emitted to the surrounding neighborhood, thus improving outdoor air quality in the surrounding neighborhood, which is the environmental justice neighborhood. And finally, this project works towards the city's goal that benefits from climate mitigation and preparedness are shared equitably among all people. That was drawn from the city's fiscal year 2021 climate action planning report. Next slide, please. So thank you for listening to our presentation. We're very excited about this project, and we want to open up the floor to questions and comments.
Okay, thank you, Fenway CDC. I will now turn it over to the boards to see if they have any questions or comments. I will be starting with you, Board Member Boyd.
Hi, thank you. I just have a quick question. Will you use turnkey heat pumps? Do you know that?
We don't currently have the specifications on the heat pumps we'll be installing. We'll be working with our MEP and sustainability consultants once water funding to really nail down which heat pump water heaters we'll be installing at the site.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Boyd. Over to me. I just want to reconfirm, how many BERDO buildings will this be affecting?
This affects one building. It's a 52-unit property, but it's all one site.
Got it. Thank you. My next question, I actually want to dive a little bit into the climbable. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The engagement that you spoke of and the future engagements. Are you hoping to fund that with the Equitable Emission Investment Fund, or is that something completely separate?
Good question. Yeah, so that's completely separate. Climbable is a local environmental justice oriented nonprofit, and they have, as part of this exploration of virtual microgrid in Fenway, they'd like to do an energy literacy campaign where they discuss with members of the community, including Fenway CDC residents, about climate change more broadly, energy in general, the grid, etc., and also to get a sense of where people go when they're, when there's heat issues or whatnot. So as part of this campaign, this is part of their proposal, and it's all included in our work with Climbable, which they're providing us with no expense to us.
Okay, thank you. You actually answered my second question regarding the mention of the virtual microgrid. So I actually have no further questions at this time. I will now turn it over. Oh my goodness, my apologies. I skipped over Councillor Coletta Zapata. I'll turn it over to you.
That's quite all right, Chair. I appreciate your thoughtful questions. In your presentation, you talked about lowering building operating expenses and reducing utility expenses. It's not lost on me that this is the nexus of affordable housing and creating affordable utilities and environmental justice neighborhood. Do you have a projected cost of the or savings per unit that each family or individual can benefit from?
Great question. Unfortunately, this project, because our domestic hot water system is paid for by the site rather than by residents, by electrifying it, we'll still be paying for it. So we'll not reduce it will not impact one way or the other the utility bills of the residents. That said, well, yeah, that's actually, sorry, thank you.
Okay, so in the slide, other benefits, lowering building operating expenses due to reduced utility expenses.
Right, so that'll be
further elaborate on that.
Sure. Yeah, that's the expenses that the site pays currently to heat the building. It's domestic hot water system. So this will reduce the amount of money that the site pays rather than the residents pay. This will lead to additional savings, like I said, that can be reinvested in the site, but these are expenses borne by the building itself. So by the owners of the building, that would be the entity that owns it, or in other words, Fenway CDC.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that. That's it for my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coletta Zapata. Over to you, Board Member Nelson. Board Member Nelson, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. What stage are you at right now with the design bid process?
Good question. Steve, could I turn that one to you on just framing where we're at in the process?
I mean, we have a rough scope that we use to get pricing, but we have not advanced it because of the $2 million total cost that we wanted funding in place before we advance it to the next level where it can have specifications and drawings, work with MEP engineers, which would be a bigger lift. So that's why we have the LISC, which are going in parallel, the funding 1.75 and this funding, which will all come together. So hopefully both of this come together and we can go full force on this project.
What happens if you do pull together plans and specs, you put it out to bid, and the actual costs go way over what your budget is?
We have a certain degree of certainty. I mean, certainty on the roundabout costs that we work with HACON based on similar systems and pulling that. But if it goes beyond, we'll have to seek further funding or use our own because we understand that the city is investing and then LISC is investing. So we'll find a way to use find resources from the CDC or find capital from other sources to make this work, like a loan or similar.
Because one of our goals with these funds is to make a difference now, and we just don't want it to be held up because the project goes way over budget.
Understood.
Okay. How about utility incentives? Have you spoken to the electric and gas company about potential incentives?
we have initiated conversations, but again, sometimes they want more concrete drawings and more concrete plans before they will engage with us. Sometimes it's really hard. We have found it really hard to engage with National Grid and Eversource when it but
right, they're going to want a TA study completed.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. And thank you again, Fenway CDC, for your presentation today. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
All right. I will now turn it back over to Diana.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Fenway CDC. We can go to the next slide, I think. So just teeing up Dorchester Bay Economic Development Corporation and their proposed project, Dorchester Bay Solar for Residents.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Williams-Etienne. I'm the asset manager at Dorchester Bay. Just a quick, brief background on Dorchester Bay. For the past 45 years, we have been committed to community development through building affordable, sustainable housing, lending to small businesses, implementing workforce development programs, and supporting community engagement within the Boston area. And today we are here to present Dorchester Bay Solar for residents. You can skip to the next slide. Brief agenda, we'll look at the project overview, the map, and resident utility benefits, solar feasibility, funding sources, workforce development, tenant communication, and lastly, the emissions reduction. Next slide. So Dorchester Bay and its residents spend thousands on electricity annually. And with the rising cost of electricity and significant upfront costs associated with solar, Dorchester Bay was presented with an opportunity to partner with Resident Energy to install solar panels at 9 buildings, which will significantly reduce emissions and provide electricity savings that can also be passed on to our residents. And with the support from the city's Equitable Emissions Fund, this will significantly reduce the upfront financial burden of investing in solar. You can go to the next slide. This is a map of the location of, there's essentially 2 projects, multiple buildings at each project, all located in the Dorchester neighborhood. Next slide. The resident utility benefits. The Glendale projects are oversized by 15% compared to their common area electricity usage. And the excess 15% savings will be donated to our residents. The intention is to select the lowest income tenants, and they will receive credits on their bills. At the Wilder buildings, we don't have the same benefit as Dorchester Bay pays for electricity. However, the excess savings will help with long-term building improvements and Dorchester Bay's programming. You can move to the next slide. Solar feasibility. So we've completed all site visits and have approved interconnection permits. Resident has secured bids for labor and materials. Dorchester Bay has received HUD's approval for these projects. And we have also submitted to the Department of Energy for the low income bonus tax credits, which we anticipate to hear back on shortly, hopefully by the end of this month. You can move to the next slide. Funding sources. So total development cost is just over $700,000. But with the addition of the investment tax credits, we have a range of about $210 to 280,000 expected in credits once the application is approved. The Glendale properties, they will be utilizing their replacement reserves to fund the solar project. And however, for Wilder, Dorchester Bay has foregone a portion of its distributions and will reinvest those amounts in solar. The emissions fund will cover about 35% of the total costs, and this is pending the tax credit adders. Next slide, please. Workforce development. This project does not include a direct workforce development component. However, in the past year, we have our team has served about 118 Boston residents in their workforce development program, reentry program, and we hope to continue this work. And this funding will will reduce the financial burden on Dorchester Bay and help us be able to continue providing these types of programs for our residents in the community. Next slide, please. Tenant communication. So our resident services team, along with management, will hold a resident meeting to discuss construction, benefits to the building, and address any concerns tenants may have. Impact to our residents is expected to be minimal, and resident services and management will work with tenants to identify and prioritize the lowest income residents with multi-bedroom units to ensure that we utilize all excess electricity as credits on their bills. Next slide, please. Emissions reduction. So I have resident, our partner, on the call as well, and Keegan will help walk you through some of the emissions reduction benefits.
Thanks, Kim. As Kim mentioned, my name is Keegan Doherty. I'm the solar account manager for DBEDC. We've been working on feasibility for these projects for well over a year now. So we're at the phase where we've provided utility permitted designs. We use a software called Scanify to produce the final estimates for how much electricity will be produced and avoided on their bills each year. So for Glendale solar systems, it's around 80,000 kilowatt hours per year, and Wilder systems about 140,000 kilowatt hours per year. So we just typed it into the greenhouse gas equivalencies calculator, which is a free resource from the EPA, to look at the general average energy mix for electricity production in the United States. It gives you a fudge factor of about 0.69 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour, which I know is different from the BERDO estimates, and we could go back and reform these if requested. So we took those annual kilograms of CO2 per year avoided and then multiplied it out over 25 years. As Kim noted in one of the slides, the roofs are fairly new, so the solar systems will continue to produce electricity beyond the 25-year mark as long as the roofs remain in good condition. But we just stopped the calculation at 25 years to give a lifetime value. And then this is more Kim's note than mine, but at the end of the slide, you can see that only one of these 9 addresses is not subject to BERDO. I'll just say that that's kind of a technicality. I don't know if that building is seen as one building by BERDO because it is firewalled. And there's some places in the registry that you can see it deeded as 2 tax parcels and some as 1. So the utility sees it as 2 buildings, but they're conjoined next to each other. And originally we had planned to put one system across those 2 buildings. So it's possible that all buildings are actually requiring BERDO. Kim, I'll turn it back to you. Thanks for the time.
Yes, thank you. Next, I believe there's a slide after this. Oh, just questions. As this is actually one of our newer projects, Indigo, and here you can see Senator Markey came out to view, and we had a session to discuss the benefits of this solar installation at one of our other projects. We're excited about the solar for our residents, and with that, I welcome any questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Dorchester Bay, for your presentation. I'm actually going to go in reverse order and ask if there are any questions or comments from the board, starting with you, Board Member Nelson.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I see that the majority of the energy is for common spaces. Is that true?
I'll have Keegan answer. Sorry.
Yeah. So for the Columbia Road buildings, basically we've covered all of the common area usage plus the 15% for residents. And then the Wilder buildings were, I believe, originally metered for residents to pay their own utilities, but now that DBEDC pays for them, any excess or rollover will be transferred onto those bills. And the percentage of coverage of the total bill cost for Wilder is much lower, just because they're paying for all of the residents' electricity as well.
Is there any roof area whereas these PV arrays could be increased in size so that more benefit could be passed down to tenants?
We've maximized basically to the available roof area. So we have to go, the typical setbacks, both from the roof edge as well as from any vents and MEP on the roof. So between that, we've maxed out Wilder, noting that there was this excess capacity. And the roofs are new, so there was no opportunity to rearrange equipment or do something like a post and rail engagement where we put things up high since they're brand new roofs.
Okay, so you have maximized the available area.
Correct.
Okay. And it sounds like the designs are complete and the installing contractor has bid the work?
Yes, as a part of the project-based Section 8 requirements, HUD requires 3 bids for installation labor and materials. And Resident collected those 3 bids. We presented them to DBEDC, who selected the final bidder. And then together we went to HUD and received conditional consent on the structural permits, which are in process for some of the buildings, but completed for, I believe, most of them at this point. So we just provide that to HUD, but it's also required by the city of Boston. We expect no concerns. We already did site visits, specifically making sure that these were not buildings of concern, and collected the building drawings that were available from the city archives in West Roxbury.
Okay. And finally, if you were to receive this funding, how quickly could this project be implemented?
We would begin, I believe, by the end of this year. we're pretty ready to go, to hit the ground.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. I'm turning it over to myself here. If we can actually go back to the slide on residents' utility benefit, I'll wait. I believe that's slide number 47. Thank you. I need some help here. Can you restate what we're discussing here on the second bullet point and the subsequent bullet points after that? I'm trying to wrap my head around understanding what I'm reading, and perhaps I'm just not reading it correctly.
So just in general, for Glendale, we plan on passing on 15% in savings to residents, and we're going to basically work with residents, identify which residents can maximize those benefits, and they will receive credits on on their utility bill, as long as they, I believe, as long as they remain within the community. Is that correct, Keegan?
That's correct. The utility allows the owners of a system to basically fill out this form to transfer those on-bill credits. So it can potentially wipe out the credits whole bill. It just depends on how much they are currently using and how many credits are produced by the solar systems at each building.
Okay, so if I'm understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, so there are credits that are being placed on the bill that can give them a discount or lower their overall bill cost. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So when I hear credits, in electricity credits, I start thinking RECs for some reason, renewable energy credits, and I started going down the wrong path there. So nevertheless, thank you for that clarification. I figured that's what it was, but I just wanted to make sure. Okay, no further questions from me. I will now turn it over to Councillor Coletta Zapata.
Thank you, Chair. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Board Member Boyd.
I apologize. It's very noisy where I'm at. Thank you. No, I don't have any questions, only a comment. I don't see any PPE on that roof. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Boyd. All right, well, once again, thank you to Dorchester Bay EDC and for your presentation today. I will now turn it back over to Diana.
Thank you, Chair. So I will now actually turn it to the community builders for their proposed project, New Franklin Park solar installation.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Whiteside, and I'm the Director of Acquisitions and Preservation at the Community Builders, or TCB. We are an experienced owner, nonprofit, developer, owner, and manager of affordable housing, and we've been in operation in Boston since 1969. I'm here this evening to present our proposal for a $250,000 grant from the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, which would partially fund the installation of a 163,000 kilowatt-hour rooftop solar array on 2 residential buildings in Dorchester that will result in a reduction in energy use of 30%. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you this evening. Next slide, please. So our proposal is centered on TCB's New Franklin Park project, which is a scattered site affordable housing property that contains 219 units across 15 buildings near Franklin Park in Roxbury and Dorchester. This is an affordable housing community with all but 8 of those 219 units formerly income restricted. About 2/3 of the apartments are restricted to households earning less than 30% of the area median income, and 25% of those are set aside for families who have experienced homelessness, and the remaining 60%, the remaining units are restricted to 60% AMI households. The property is solidly in a Justice 40 community. It's a 219 unit complex, but we are actually targeting the installation of solar on just 2 of the 15 buildings at the New Franklin Park campus. Both of those buildings are in Seaver Street and are home to 67 of the 219 families at the site. Both of these buildings were built in about 1930, and they came up for TCB because they are over the BERDO emissions limit, and without intervention will result in compliance payments that over time would burden this affordable housing site significantly and result in lowered investments into the physical structure and cutting of key social services that TCB provides to families who are living there. So we're proposing to undertake this project in order to provide financial and health benefits to residents and to the commercial daycare that's located in one of these 2 buildings, and also to position the property to continue providing a high quality level of service to residents well into the future by reducing the property's operating costs, allowing TCB to invest in capital needs at the property over time, as well as in our community life resident services programming at the site. Next slide, please. So to give an overview of the project, TCB proposes to install a 163,000 kilowatt-hour solar array that would be mounted on a racking system on top of the roofs of these 2 buildings. We want to install the panels as part of a canopy system because we're planning to do a larger deep energy retrofit project that would require the installation of heat pumps, and the canopy would provide the rooftop space to enable us to do so. So between the 2 arrays, we're expecting the site's energy consumption to be reduced by a full 30%. Next slide, please. The project is ready to proceed as soon as we have funding awards in hand. We have the project team assembled, a site visit has been made, and as soon as we receive funding, Resident will be able to engage their engineer for a structural load design so we can refine the panel layout and move toward permitting. And I forgot to introduce a key project member, that is Resident Energy, and Keegan is here to represent TCB as well at this board meeting. So Keegan, I'll hand it over to you for the next 3 slides, and he will talk about the details of the array sizing and how Resident arrived at the projected energy and emissions reductions figures that are shown on the following slides.
Thanks, Leah, and good to see everybody or talk to everybody again. So this first design you see at 132 to 140 Seaver Street relies on something called post and rail raised racking. It's very common in New York City. It's less common in Boston, although Resident is involved in several projects that are doing this or have done it already. Basically, what it entails is raising the solar canopy above the level of the HVAC equipment on the roof. As this building undergoes electrification in the future, both the ability of TCB to upgrade equipment on the roof and as well as reseam and repair the roof will be enabled going forward. It also allows us to increase the density of the panels compared to other racking types, such as the lower cost but more common ballasted racking systems that we've seen on other solar layouts thus far. I think we can continue to the next slide. Here's another design. Something that you will note here is that we are crossing the firewall threshold along the building. We have successfully done this type of design with Alston Brighton CDC on a building that they have now completed and permitted. It's actually fully up and running. The city of Boston and Resident Energy worked together to permit this where previously it was not allowed, and it enables us to fully maximize the rooftop space with this raised post and rail racking system. You can see both of these systems are at about 70 kilowatts with Tier 1 490 watt panels. Tier 1 just means that they are made by reputable companies that are rated Tier 1 by Bloomberg. That means that their warranties are worth something because they're not likely to go out of business. And 490 watt panels just is the wattage for these panels. That's something that's flexible as we move forward with the future designs of this building. We can go to the next slide. Would you like me to touch upon this as well, Leah?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this 30% in energy savings number is a ballpark based on the anticipated increase in energy usage. It is a very rough figure right now, as we don't have a final figure for the load analysis at this building, which is a very delicate and tricky number that often even the best energy basically retrofits can get wrong. So it's always best to upsize systems as much as possible because once they undergo electrification, we often see them unable to produce as much electricity as they need. So we maxed out the systems as best we could with that raised racking. And we were able to produce, roughly, as you can see here, 55,000 kilograms of CO2 per year. Again, using that greenhouse gas equivalency calculator. As I stated for DBEDC, we're also happy to convert the kilowatt hours to kilograms of CO2 using the BERDO methodology. And again, here we estimated a 25-year time horizon for the lifetime of the systems, although even more so than a ballasted racking system, the raised racking can likely be extended just because roof repairs can be done underneath. So while the systems are more expensive to install as post and rail, the lifespan can be extended greatly given that ability to repair roofs. We can go to the next slide.
Great, thanks, Keegan. I can take over from here. So for our budget, we expect this project to cost just over $900,000. The budget includes roof upgrades to accommodate both repairs and also to accommodate the load of the canopy system, installation of the solar system itself, and consulting fees. And our sources include the BERDO EEIF grant, a solar investment tax credit, equity from a TCB source, and Solar for All funding when it becomes available through the state. Next slide, please. And then for context, this is also part of a larger $8 million deep energy retrofit project that we plan to undertake using other public resources. Improving the building envelope and electrifying heating and cooling equipment will bring the total energy reduction up to 50% over current use or under current use. Our sources for this larger project include a grant from the Mayor's Office of Housing, LISC's Climate Ready Fund, HUD's Green Resilient Retrofit Program, and a grant from the Department of Energy Resources. However, the solar installation can take place either in advance of or with the larger retrofit scope. Next slide, please. In terms of benefits, these two buildings at New Franklin Park are home to 67 families, over half of whom have incomes of under 30% of the area median income, and a majority of the residents here identify as people of color. We are committing to depositing 14% of the annual savings that result from the solar installation into a reserve at the property that TCB's Community Life Division, which is our resident services division at TCB and provides services to New Franklin Park residents. Our Community Life Division will use those funds to support residents both in signing up for community solar programs and also to directly fund the on-site food pantry. We know that residents at New Franklin Park face a high level of food insecurity, and this contribution will be a meaningful increase to the food pantry's funding and to the quality of life for residents here, and enabling our community life staff to focus their time on assisting residents to access less expensive clean energy will directly help household budgets. In addition, the solar array will offset the electrical load of the common areas for all of the 67 units, and also the on-site daycare. There's a daycare on the ground floor of one of the two buildings, and reducing their electrical costs will help bring clean energy to a site that serves young children and reduce the small local business operating costs. More broadly speaking, of course, the reduction of energy consumption will move these two buildings toward net zero over time and will more immediately bring the buildings into compliance with BERDO emission standards, at least through 2030. And in terms of resident engagement, TCB has on-site community life resident services coordinators who will help the project management team who's leading the installation of the solar array, will help us coordinate meetings with residents so that folks living on site are aware of the project's possible impacts to their daily life. However, given that this is mostly a rooftop installation, we expect the solar array installation to be relatively quick and minimally impact residents. So our initial meetings on this project will likely be more focused on how the solar energy will benefit them directly. Next slide, please. In terms of workforce development, we're working with Resident Energy, a local Boston company. We have a strong preference at TCB for hiring local and MBE subcontractors, and Resident has committed to following through on this in their work with us. We expect that we'll be able to create 10 full-time equivalent positions as a result of the investment in the solar system or the building of the solar system on site. And we commit to paying a prevailing wage, as this will be a requirement of the Solar for All funding resource. Next slide, please. And to close out, our project team includes consultants who are highly regarded in their fields. Resident, as we said, is the lead for the solar design and installation. And as part of our larger electrification and energy retrofit project, we are engaging BWA architects and New Ecology, who are advising on the scope that we will plan to implement either simultaneously or just after the solar installation. Thank you again for your time. Looking forward to hearing your questions.
All right. Well, thank you to the community builders. I will now turn it over to the board to see what questions or comments they may have, starting with you, Board Member Boyd.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Boyd. I just want to comment, it was interesting hearing about the solar canopy. I think that relatively new information for me personally, and I'm glad to hear that it's been working in other cities. And I guess my only question is about stability, and how stability has been sort of addressed, or how has that concern been addressed in general? We're in Boston. Hopefully, if we still continue to get a lot of snow, I worry about the stability and the weight of snow on such a project. So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Keegan, would you mind saying a bit about your experience with this kind of system?
Sure. Yeah. So step one is collecting additional information about the existing structure. So where on each of these roofs, what we'll do is a load analysis. So there's two types of loads that we look at. One is the live load and one is the dead load. Dead load is things like snow that build up and sit on the roof, as well as the new solar equipment, the racking. And we'll determine if we need to add sleepers or basically long beams that are, watertight and, attached to the roof to distribute some of that weight, which would also help us distribute some of the live load, which is like wind. I mean, we're basically putting up this large system onto the roof, which will create a live load, especially in high wind events. But this is very common in the Northeast, including especially New York City, and we have reliable contractors that have been able to do the structural enhancement where necessary with the sleepers. And then where the roof has existing and easily accessible structural members that are well distributed for the racking, the post and rail, then we can just tie into those instead. So it is definitely a heavier lift as far as the engineering and pre-work. And it's part of the reason why this funding is exciting to help complete that work, since it is a higher barrier to entry, but it has a long-term payback for TCB and their residents.
Okay. Thank you, Keegan, for that response. That was helpful. And I did it again. My apologies. Councillor Coletta Zapata. I keep doing this.
That's okay. Like I said, I love hearing your diligent questions. And I have none. So thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Councillor. All right. Now over to you, Board Member Nelson.
Where are you with the design and bid process for this project?
We are waiting for a funding award, after which a resident will engage their engineer to design, as you said, assess the load that can be supported with the existing structure and determine what additional supports we might need to add to support the system. And then we will go out to bid this.
So once again, it's very early on. What happens if the cost of the project greatly exceeds your budget?
A good question. We feel that we've sufficiently budgeted with enough cushion in this budget to accommodate. I think the biggest risk would be that if there is more structural support required than we anticipate now, then that would be the biggest cost increase. I think the sizing of the cost of the array itself is pretty darn accurate. We've relied on Resident Energy's experience with the cost of installation of the actual solar panels themselves. So again, mostly a question of the risk being around the structural capacity, but I think that we've included enough of a contingency in our budget to support that.
That's right. We went very high on the contingency in the budget, specifically to accommodate this type of risk, which is not really, we're not actually putting in new beams into the building. It's mainly just distributing more weight with the sleepers to enable the attachments to be basically distributed across the members that are supporting the roof. As well as higher waterproofing costs, which is the other thing that we've included in there. So,
and do those beams sit on top of the roof material?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to do it, but that's the most common way, is to basically, you might see them on some roofs that are solar ready, where they actually place the sleepers on top and tie them in. That way you don't have to pierce through, many layers of insulation and the roof assemblage. But there's a number of ways to do it, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not the engineer on our team.
Okay. Do the tenants pay their own electric bill?
They do at the site, yes. And I will say, as part of the electrification project that we're planning, we are considering whether that will make sense into the future and are taking into account, we're trying to evaluate, are we going to be impacting tenants' electricity bills to the point that we should master meter instead and offset our own costs with this solar array? But yes, to answer your basic question, tenants do pay their electricity bills currently.
Well, it looked to me as though the images of the roofs, that there was opportunity to expand the size of the array. Did you consider that, and then maybe sharing in those savings with the tenants by moving those solar credits towards their bill?
Keegan, do you mind talking about the sizing? I believe we've maxed out with this layout, the possible array sizing.
That's right. Based on the racking manufacturer and what's available, it's hard to expand it by adding another row. Basically, we would be running into some setback rules, so we're limited on what is available and permittable.
Okay, so when I looked at that image, there were setback requirements and things that made it look as though the array wasn't as large as the roof area.
Right, and one way to think about it too is that the equipment itself comes in pre-established widths and lengths, and so we have to work within those parameters. So adding another row would be difficult. We could do a really tiny one, but then you start running into low return on investment per additional small row. So we try to max out the return for what is an expensive racking solution, but has the higher long-term benefit.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. And once again, thank you to the community builders. We appreciate your time and your presentation. Turning it back over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Chair. So I think we should, next slide. So just want to introduce our last, but certainly not least, applicant, Codman Square NDC, for their project proposal, Advancing Building Decarbonization at Washington, Columbia 1 and 2.
Thank you, Diana. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Marcia Thornhill, I'm Vice President of Operations, and I'm joined here today with Tim Kapelis, who's our Director of Real Estate, as well as Neil Donnelly from Resident. It looks like everyone's using Resident, who will also provide some insight when the slides are talking about the project. But I'll open up the project. This is, we're looking at, we're not looking at solar panels like everyone else. And the reason for that is that we do have solar panels on Washington, Columbia 1 and 2. We had done that about 7 years ago. About a half of those roofs have solar panels. So we do have solar panels, but we are looking to advance, as it says here, advance more decarbonization efforts in these properties. They're aging properties, and we're looking at a much larger renovation project. But for this grant, if you can advance the slide, please. Just to talk about our mission for a minute, if I may. We're a CDC, as several other CDCs spoken, and we've been in Codman Square for about 43 years. And we have about 900 or so units in our portfolio. And these two properties make up about a third of our portfolio. They're two large projects, about 326 units, 151 in Wash 1, which has 5 buildings, and another 7 buildings in Wash 2, which has 175 units. 12 of the 17 buildings have to comply with BERDO. I know that's been a question, so we anticipated that. And so we have about 12 of the 17. If you can advance, I just want to say we do other things besides brick and mortar, but we do have, other economic development and community engagement programs similar to what you heard from like Dorchester Bay. So these are the maps. I know they're not the best, but as you can see, the 5 circles to the left is Washington 1. Again, those are 5 buildings. And the map to the right is Wash 2, which are 7 buildings, for a total of 17. And these buildings are located on Washington, Geneva Ave, and Columbia Road. Next slide, please. And as I had said, this is part of a larger effort by us to decarbonize in our entire portfolio. But in terms of this building, we started, some years ago with the solar installation, and we want to continue on. And you'll hear more about what this grant that we're proposing would do. But right now, we have drawings, we have scope ready. We feel that this is considering the type of project it is, that we can readily start this when we are awarded, if we are awarded. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Ed Donnelly, who's going to speak a little bit about the efforts that we're trying to do.
Thanks, Marcia. My name is Neil Donnelly from New Ecology. I'm a senior energy engineer and have gone through the decarbonization proposal for Washington 1 and 2, among some other buildings on the call tonight. So our thinking on Washington 1 and 2 is the way that we think about our decarbonization process is we like to start with energy efficiency, and we kind of split that into two categories. The first one being load reduction and planning for indoor air quality. Second subpiece there is optimization of existing systems. And so we're trying to reduce the load and then move into the second step of electrification and then renewables. So in the scope that we are proposing here of low flow water fixtures and drain water heat recovery, we are really going into addressing the energy efficiency portion here first as that first step of a decarbonization project, the load reduction and optimization of the existing systems. Next slide, please. Great. This pie chart shows, for these Washington buildings, shows the significant portion of building energy currently being used for domestic hot water. We're seeing that as 30% of the energy used. And I often refer to domestic hot water as a juicy piece of building energy. It's typical to see domestic hot water usage, between 20 and 30% of building energy usage. And one of the other reasons that we're putting this scope of work forward is that compared to a full, say, deep energy retrofit scope of work, we're seeing that a lot of buildings have to take more of a zero over time approach. And so by going after domestic hot water, that's a piece of the energy puzzle that is very commonly available to, it's available to all buildings. And that can be a first step towards a full building decarbonization, as it can take a much longer time to figure out how to fund and make a whole building envelope, heating, cooling, ventilation system retrofit happen. So all of those components are in the decarbonization plan for Washington 1 and 2, and just figuring out how each individual organization can make those steps forward. So that's why we're putting forward this proposed first step scope. Next slide, please. So the scope that we're talking about is low flow fixtures, toilets, and drain water heat recovery. So I'll talk on the low flow fixtures, and then I'll invite Gerald Van Decker from Renewability Energy Inc. to talk on the drain water heat recovery. So here, toilets are shown, but we're talking about all water fixtures, faucets, shower heads, and toilets. The savings that we calculated as part of our ASHRAE Level 2 audit that we did here, the savings calculated reflect the reductions in domestic hot water heating energy and water utility costs. However, the energy impact of reducing the water usage, energy of pumping and water treatment, is not yet accounted for by many funding sources. But the recommended fixture replacements are estimated to reduce total water use at the Washington apartments by 2.1 million gallons annually, about 20% of the current water consumption, and reduce energy usage by more than 60 million BTUs annually. Next slide, and Gerald.
Yes, hi there. It's Gerald Van Decker. I'm talking to you from Ontario, Canada. So drain water heat recovery might be new to most of you folks. I've been involved with it for over 24 years. And my company and I are the recognized global leaders in the technology in the field. We do manufacture the technology in in Ontario. It's not something that's made in China or something like that. And so we are very responsive on the design. I'm a professional engineer myself. Just a definition, what we're talking about is using outgoing warm drain water to preheat incoming cold fresh water. And this is effectively a rated, code accepted heat exchanger, totally safe with potable water that just transfers the energy between the two lines. And it's manufactured, labeled, tested, etc., approved, certified with the UL Underwriter Laboratories. An example of if your drain, for example, is 101 Fahrenheit, that's after some heat loss from the shower mostly, and your inlet temperature is 46 Fahrenheit, your outlet temperature would be about 75 Fahrenheit with a typical longer residential unit. This shows an installation in a home, and it doesn't matter what your drain piping is in the building or the home, it works with any of these. We have sold through homedepot.com for about 15 years now, and that's just an ongoing thing for DIY. Next slide. So an example, we do have the units are plumbed in different ways, and just to understand, it's effectively mandatory in the provinces of Ontario and Quebec since 2017. Sorry, Ontario, Manitoba, since 2017. The simplest way to understand it is the preheated water goes to the water heater, so the water heater doesn't have to work as hard, whether that's in a single house or in a multifamily residential building. We also do have installations where we're preheating to the cold side of the shower, and both. And that gives us the highest energy savings. But the systems that we're looking at here would be a central horizontal system. And to understand the vertical, they are generally the most cost-effective way to do it in a single home. But we've found that these, with 70 installations and absolutely zero maintenance, totally passive, in multifamily and hotels, that it is very cost effective. And that's with a very cheap energy supply. It's actually, most of the systems have been done in Stockholm, Sweden, and they're on district energy. The load reduction is, we were using a number of 23% to be a bit conservative with a totally passive system. The units or the systems can be coupled with water source heat pumps, but we're not looking at that in this current project, just to keep it simple. And the actual savings on the next slide that are quoted are quite a bit conservative. I mentioned to Neil, you'll actually see a 5.5% reduction in the building energy load consumption.
Can you advance the slide, please? I'm sorry.
Sorry, yes, right here. And I should have asked maybe, but instead of 3.2%, it's about 5.5% reduction. That's after considering the low flow faucets already taken into consideration. So that pie from 30% that Neil showed earlier, or was shown earlier, the energy consumption in the building will be reduced with the low flow by about 6%. And then we would do another 5.5 percentage points. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gerald. I'll stay on this slide for just a moment. So the scope we're talking about, we're talking about reducing overall water usage, reducing the domestic hot water usage, and recovering the heat from the drain water stack to be preheating our domestic hot water. And so we'd be using the drain water heat recovery in these buildings to preheat the makeup water to the domestic hot water system, as well as like the cold side to the central mixing valve. So we're essentially, increasing the heating capacity of our central domestic hot water systems. We're pulling less water through the actual water heater. So efficiency from adding efficiency from a lot of different angles there. I agree the calculations here definitely conservative. That's how I like my calculations to be. But we're talking about a total of 5 points from my calculations, a total of 5.7% energy and 4.8% emission savings. Here we're looking at a simple payback of about 2.2 years. So looking at very replicable projects. The targeted focus of this project on load reduction and optimization of existing systems as that first step in the decarbonization plan prevents a significant opportunity for training and education as part of this project for contractors, inspectors, and other CDCs. The waste energy is present, it's available, and unutilized in almost all buildings. And making the training and education opportunity with this project very exciting in its replicability and ease of implementation. We're going for a very simple drain water heat recovery installation method that, the changes are limited just to the mechanical room. Targeting the domestic hot water system presents an immediately actionable step towards decarbonization, accessible to a high percentage of buildings when full decarbonization scopes, including new heating, cooling systems, and full envelope improvements can take a significant period of time to plan and implement. And I think, as I said earlier, this simple payback for this scope is calculated at 2.2 years. Next slide, please. This is just an example of showing this building with its blue bars to the far left, showing an example building from this group's building emissions currently above the BERDO emission standard. BERDO emission standard shown in the green stepping down line. And so this graph is showing the full decarbonization scope that we've prepared for the Washington 1 buildings. So beyond just the first step scope that we're talking about in this project, but showing that this is the planned first step towards an overall decarbonization over time project that we're looking at for Washington. Next slide.
Thank you, Neil.
Great, thank you, Neil.
Tim?
I'm Tim Capeless, Director of Real Estate for Carbon. This next slide and a few others, just a few more slides to go. I just wanted to present on this budget, the breakdown of what we're requesting grant fund. It's of using the grant funds of $309,000, and we'll be also utilizing placement reserves at both of these properties for a total of about $520,000. The bulk of the costs are obviously in the drain water heat recovery system of $182,000, which would be 100% funded by the BERDO fund. And then the low flow fixtures and aerators would be sort of between replacement reserve funding and funds requested from this grant. Next slide, please. Regarding workforce development, WIN Properties is our management company, and they utilize a maintenance apprentice program, which is a great program, gives people an opportunity to learn about the maintenance field. And those apprentices would be working on this project. We would also be hiring MBE plumber and electrician for the installation of both of the systems into the units. Again, there would be 300 units overall, so significant piece of it. Next slide, please. In the next slide, talk about our engagement with the community. We would be sending out detailed flyers and holding resident meetings and discussing with residents well in advance of the actual work taking place about the specifics of this project, how it would affect them and their units, but then all the overall project goals that we have to decarbonize the buildings.
If you can advance the next slide, Diana, it'd be great. This sort of gives a more detailed explanation of our efforts to communicate with our residents.
Right, thank you, Marcia. Yeah, the resident meetings and notifications in the first section up there, we would be holding those meetings. We would have, during the work, we would have accommodations set up for the residents to come to a community room. There'd be refreshments there. We would provide them, a stipend. to cover some meals for the few hours that the work would be taking place in their units. And again, would be, doing a, collaborative approach with resident services, property management, maintenance teams, and using electricians and plumbers that we have connections with, and using the apprentice program, educating the residents about the sustainability efforts. Next slide, please. Challenges that exist, this is a big project, as mentioned before. There's 12 buildings, so we lack of funding to do all of the energy efficiency work that we would like to do, but this is a great first effort towards decarbonizing the buildings. And I guess another challenge, addressing utility-owned equipment like transformers, is a challenge in reducing. We have existing solar panels on the roofs of many of these buildings, so we would like to add more solar at some point in the future, but would have to evaluate the roof at a later
And these
time.
challenges, I just want to point out, not necessarily related to the current scope of work that we're proposing under the grant. As we said, this is a phased project, so we're looking at longer term and the whole project as a whole. Go ahead, Tim, I'm sorry.
Next slide, please. Slides. Okay, yeah, so the next steps would be to monitor the performance of these systems, implement additional measures to further reduce operation costs, and leverage IRA for utility incentives to finance additional projects in the future, and identify opportunities for additional solar, and continue to engage residents about managing energy in the future, continuing decarbonization for the rest of this property and the portfolio as well. That is the end of our presentation. We'll open it up for questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Codman Square CDC, for your presentation. I will now turn it over to the board to see if there's any questions and comments. Again, I'll be going in reverse order this time, and starting with you, Board Member Nelson.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for the presentation. Masha, at the start of the presentation, you commented on how many of the buildings that
I'm glad you, I wanted to correct that. We have all 12 buildings part of subject to BERDO. There are 12 buildings in between the two properties, 5 in Wash 1 and 7 in Wash 2. I had misspoken, and 12 of those buildings, all 12, in other words, are subject to BERDO.
all of them then?
Yeah.
Okay. And as far as the design, where are you with that? The design bid process?
Neil?
Yeah, so we have like preliminary scope on the drainwater heat recovery units to be worked out for each individual building. And we have kept the design intent very simple so that the amount of building that we're disrupting with these changes is very minimal. So individual scope to be hammered out by building, but simple.
Okay, so the design still has to be developed.
Yeah, on just the building by building basis for how the specific implementation of the drainwater heat recovery.
Yeah, but it's not a lot of design work to left over to do, Jack.
And if I can mention, it's extremely easy to do on our side, and we do not charge for that service. It's very simple. Neil gives me some information about the building, and we work out the design together. Then we do a CAD drawing if it's needed.
In this age of decarbonization, heat recovery from any heat source is very important, and sanitary waste is a good place to find waste heat. But I have yet to see something like this applied. Is this approved by the Mass Plumbing Board?
Yes, it
The
is.
short answer for that is yes. We are on file. We actually need to renew. I was before the board in 2007 in Quincy at an old courthouse. And we were the first ones to be approved. We just have to fill out the documentation to get it renewed. I didn't realize that it expired. That's all. So.
Okay. Is this project eligible for a gas utility incentive? Because it's offsetting gas.
It could be. That's something we should look into. And we can talk more with resident about that opportunity. I don't know off the top of my head right now if we qualify for rebates. I assume you're referring to.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're reducing gas consumption so that if the product is approved by, I assume Engrid is the gas utility?
Eversource maybe, but
Eversource, okay.
Most every utility in North America has a custom approval process. We've actually been in various projects with utilities and received awards from 2 of them. So we would help with that application as well.
And I assume that the sanitary waste is on the inside of a 3-inch or 4-inch pipe, and then the domestic water feed is wrapped around the outside of that. Is that what I saw in that image?
Yes, to explain it, I like to step back from saying that it's wrapped around, because I don't want people to think that it's getting wrapped around on site or something. It's a manufactured double wall vented heat exchanger that's approved, meets the standards and whatnot, that has the multi-coils wrapped around a 3, 4, 6, even 2-inch units, depending on the specific application. We actually have over 120,000 units installed right now. And as I said, I'm not surprised that it's new to a number of folks on the call here. But it's just
are there any installed in Boston?
There are some in Massachusetts, Boston itself. I am not sure. We have them installed across the US and of course Canada and Europe. It's a very popular product in some countries in Europe.
And my last question, what is the benefit to tenants? Will they see any reduction in energy bill as a result of this?
These are all owner-paid utilities that we're talking about already. So no impact to tenants. They're getting new water fixtures, and I always describe another benefit of drinking water heat recovery as you're essentially expanding the heating capability of your existing domestic hot water system. So we're giving the building more more firepower if there were any issues in any buildings of the domestic hot water system not being able to keep up at times, we're expanding the ability to serve those loads as well.
Understood. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. All right. Thank you for that question, actually, about the financial incentives. One of my questions was, has Codman Square CDC explored other potential financial incentives that could help support this project in general?
We have been for this particular project, but we are exploring other grant opportunities for the larger project that we spoke about earlier. But for this specific project we're targeting right now, as Tim explained, operating reserves, which we have sufficient operating reserves in both properties. And now we will also target incentives through the utility company as well.
Very well, thank you. This one has already been answered. I just want to thank you for clarifying that resident engagement scope that you had. That was helpful for me to understand how that financials were lining up. If we can just do me a quick favor, I want to make sure I'm understanding something. Can we go back to slide 78, please? All right, so right here, just a spitballing questions here. This is a representation of one building, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's correct. We did our decarbonization assessment covered Washington 1, and so we did historical energy analysis for comparing all the buildings, and then picked a representative building as they're all very similar. So this is showing the starting point building emissions, and then going through 2050 with a full decarbonization scope.
Got it. So this one project alone is not going to have the immediate impact. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Is this deep energy retrofit's going to cause your emissions for example, this one building to drop almost, say, 2/3 here? Is that what we're showing?
The drop here it includes a full deep energy retrofit.
Okay.
So beyond the first step scope that we're proposing as part of this grant. So also included in the blue drop there, would be building envelope, heating, cooling, the full every system addressed.
Got it. Thank you. Oh, Marcia, did you have another comment there?
No, I was just gonna disagree. I agree with Neil. That's why I was shaking my head. No, I don't.
Okay, no problem. All right, those are all my questions and comments for now. I will now turn it over to Councillor Coletta Zapata. Seems the councillor may have dropped off.
I'll connect with her.
Okay,
Chair.
not a problem. Thank you, Diana.
Has rejoined, so I think we can move back forward to the next slide.
Okay, so shall we enter public comment then?
I believe so.
Not a problem. We will now open the meeting to public comment. As a reminder to the members of the public, to provide public comment, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. Send your question to staff via email at berdoreviewboard@boston.gov. As a reminder, we are limiting questions to 3 minutes to ensure everyone has a chance to speak. We also ask members of the public to please introduce themselves and their neighborhood. We will now wait to give members of the public the opportunity to provide comments. So there was one comment earlier, I believe it was related to the community builders, or I hope I'm correct on that one, that was provided by Gerald Van Decker, stating you might consider having the tenants still pay 50% of their bills because they have control over their consumption. I'm not sure if any members of the community builders are still on the line that would want to respond to that.
Hello, I'm still here. It's a good suggestion and we can consider that. And just note that the consideration of whether to convert from tenant paid to owner paid utilities wouldn't be done as part of the solar project that's proposed with BERDO funding, but rather as part of the larger deep energy retrofit scope.
Thank you, Leah. All right, are there any further questions or comments from the public? All right, hearing none, I will now close the public comment period. And I hope this is not inappropriate, Diana. I just want to make sure that I provide Councillor Coletta Zapata an opportunity to provide any questions or comments in regards to the last presentation or just in general.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize that I had to jump off. No, I think I'm all set. All of these were super informative and fascinating, especially as it relates to the drain heat pumps. So I think I'm good, but I appreciate you circling back. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you, Councillor. All right. So once again, thank you to all of our presenters and applicants for the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the motion to adjourn the meeting, board members in favor say aye.
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 Board members opposed say nay.
Aye.
Okay, there we go.
Aye.
Thank you very much, board members. The ayes have it. The motion passes. This meeting is adjourned at 6:46 p.m. Thank you all.